This might look familiar to you. A typical American town. Spread out, repetitive, and almost indistinguishable. It doesn't matter if you're from California, Arizona, or Alabama. Places like these are what constitute American cities. These aren't particularly welcoming or comfortable areas, and most people can admit these aren't exactly sought-after hotspots. So, why is it so common? Many assume that it's because all Americans are infatuated with cars or have no taste or other cliché stereotypes, but this isn't actually the public's choice. In fact, most of us have no say in whether our cities look like this or not. Spaces like these aren't an accident or preference. Towns are deliberately designed to look this way. In many cases, it's illegal to build anything else. Some characteristics you probably notice is the extensive concrete, urban sprawl, and car dependency. Even though towns like these represent American societies, they come with many drawbacks. From hurting small businesses to extreme deforestation, our approach to building American cities is too one-sided and enforced. There's been one pattern prominent areas share: they use traditional development, in which, in many cases now, is illegal to build. Traditional development refers to the urban planning style humans used for thousands of years, pre-automobile and built to human scale. Traditional development is usually notorious for being trendy or aesthetic and tend to flourish culturally and economically. They were also predominantly mixed-use areas. Mixed-use areas mean spaces containing both housing and commercial development. In general, traditional developments accumulate more revenue, foot traffic, and are in higher demand than suburban developments. So, if the public prefers to spend their leisure time in these areas, why aren't we building them? There are many legal barriers that our community face when it comes to city design that make areas like these pretty much rampant. And in fact, our recent generations are some of the first spending their entirety of our lives in what many of us like to call the suburban experiment. Many people assume that our cities look like this because we have a different geography, more landmass, or because we're a younger country. But cities like this actually used to be the normal for most of American history. Throughout the United States lifespan, our country consisted of towns and cities that were quite the contrary. So, what happened? In the 1920s, the U.S. Supreme Court released a court landmark called Euclid versus Ambler. This is now referred to as Euclidean zoning. Every country has some form of zoning, and it improved the quality of living for millions of people. Euclidean zoning was originally created to prevent nuances and pollution where people lived. However, some countries became a bit too excessive. Much of the United States is heavily based off Euclidean zoning, which created a massive shift in our urban design. I interviewed a successful urban designer named Juan Mullerat, the founding principal of Suburban Design, with over 20 years of experience working on projects, including the Wynwood Master Plan and Miami-Dade County Smart Plan.
The word Euclidean comes from the town of Euclid, and it was a Supreme Court ruling that basically protected the rights of one property owner that was being affected by the uses of the property owner next door. The town of Euclid is the reason why we call it Euclidean zoning. And it was the beginning of the separation of uses. The main goal of zoning is to protect the interests of property. Mixed uses are the way that cities used to be built. And this separation of uses is a new invention. We've been abducted into this idea that we must separate our uses. If things are separated, you tend to diminish the ability of moving from one to the next.
So when Euclidean zoning started to get enforced, what once used to consist of a country filled with mixed-use areas was now dominated by rigid divisions separating areas by residential, industrial, and commercial zones. So adding an office on top of a salon, illegal. Putting a convenience store in a single-family home area, illegal. This is what a Euclidean zoning map looks like. Spaces are literally divided into different categories. A common pattern this emits is its lack of space for mixed-use areas and multifamily residential units. Form-based zoning is more rational.
Form-based zoning begins to put uses together in a vertical manner, and sometimes horizontally as well. A mixed use can also be horizontal, but within proximity. So I never dismiss the fact that you can stack uses on top of each other. Typically, you have your retail storefronts on the ground level, and then you can either, go office or residential or different uses above. But you can also have a complex within which you have different uses that interact with each other. The reason why I mentioned form-based codes is because it's the one that we are working most on. And form-based codes basically stay or regulate the way buildings are shaped and what uses can go inside of that shape. And I think that's important because traditional, what we call Euclidean zoning, does not go to that detail.
Euclidean zoning also pushed for developers to build and buyers to live in the single-family home, widely viewed by city planners as the model of ideal American families. To do this, city government took extensive chunks of land and confined them to only single-family homes. The suburbs grew in rapid rates, and cities across the nation began regulating the ability to build up, causing developers to build further and further out. Cities weren't just blocking traditional urban developments from being built. Now, with the help of federal backing, cities gave license to rezone and condemn neighborhoods as blight, often wiping out entire neighborhoods for minor building infractions. Later, they shifted their targets to people of color and created zoning policies to regulate population by race or cultural background. They also favored long, wide streets and narrow sidewalks with the goal of reshaping American cities around the automobile.
An 8-cylinder car, a 6-passenger car.
We want a car that gives us...
Before, our traditional cities didn't build roads for cars. They were for people. But with the early automobile industry gaining attraction, car companies began realizing the financial opportunity they could make if they made cars the main form of transportation. For cars to take over the road and to remove any other way of getting around, they paid off politicians to overturn laws that regulate cars, used front corporations to buy up streetcar companies to shut them down, and launched PR campaigns to make it illegal for people to be in the street. However, people felt that cars were a menace to society. In 1923 alone, more than 17,000 Americans were killed in automobile accidents, and more than half were children. People reacted to this havoc with outrage. It didn't help that most automobiles were basically toys for the ultra-wealthy. In 1923, 42,000 people in Cincinnati signed a petition calling for all cars to be installed with mechanical regulators, limiting their speed to 25 miles an hour. Even though this petition failed, this shocked the automobile industry. So they started launching massive propaganda campaigns to convince the public that it was the pedestrians and not the cars who were unwelcome on the city streets.
A contributing factor to this needless waste of human life is the thoughtlessness and the carelessness of the average pedestrian.
Regulations like the 1928 Model Municipal Traffic Ordinance were made, creating some of the strictest anti-pedestrian rules in America. People weren't obeying these rules, so powerful lobby auto campaigners lobbied police to publicly shame transgressors, staged safety campaigns with actors dressed as clowns to cross the street illegally, and promote the word jaywalker.
When the scoop is open, a jaywalker simply can't get run over, and sometimes that's more than he deserves.
The word jay basically meant something like idiot. Pro-auto groups use this word to label someone who doesn't care about public safety and doesn't know how to walk in the city. Now, thanks to suburban sprawl, Euclidean zoning, car-oriented development, and ordinances, people became discouraged from walking and pressured to buy a car. Even though massive civic centers and plazas were erected to build new developments inspired by modern planning, many of these spaces were not being used by the public the way that the designers intended them to, or if anything being used at all. Many spaces with suburban development are often isolated and lack activity. Walkable mixed-use communities are very desirable spaces. However, since many live in a system that makes building areas like these illegal, some resort to building stand-ins that replicate these areas. For instance, a multitude of Americans find college to be the best time of their lives, because for many, it's the first time in their life where they lived in an area designed for humans. College campuses are filled with more amenities, which are navigable by foot. Malls are also an attractive hangout spot because they replicate traditional downtown areas that are scarce to find today. Many people could go to a specific area and get all their shopping done in one stop without having to get out the car. Even though malls are dying here in the United States, the ones that are making a comeback are the ones that are being more experience-based. People aren't just coming for their convenience, they're coming because of the atmosphere. There's so many examples of desirable developments that replicate traditional downtown development, from Disney World to cruises. People will specifically go out of their way and even spend money to experience places like these. If they can't be built, people will make special efforts to replicate and visit these destinations. In most of our country, spaces like these are scarce because planners weren't perceptive of how people use space, and therefore didn't design spaces that would accommodate those uses, making cities unwalkable, less safe, and isolated people from one another. It's not that our country is too poor or incapable of building areas like this. It's just that we live in a system that makes communities like this an obstacle to build. But it doesn't have to be this way. Hey guys, my name is Hannah Kossoff. I wanted to just let you guys know that this is actually going to be a series that I am trying to make about urban design. So if you guys like this kind of content, please like, comment, and subscribe, because I'm going to be posting a lot more videos that are like this, but covering different subjects as well. So like how this kind of development affects our mental health, physical health, economy, all of those things really. So really just stay tuned. And also, just a little disclaimer, these videos are actually going to take me longer than my normal videos. I didn't realize how much work they were to make these sort of things, but there's a lot more for me left to learn. So until I get the hang of it, I'm going to be taking longer than my normal videos. And I also put down below some organizations that help support this movement and some sources and links, other stuff like that. Anyways, thank you so much again for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure you stay tuned. Bye!